Good afternoon, and welcome back to the Garden of Grace devotion. My name is Pastor Katie, and I'm one of the pastors at Trinity Lutheran Church in Lilburn, Georgia. Today, I would like to share with you the words of a hymn that have been running through my mind over the last couple of days. The hymn is entitled, "This is My Father's World." It was written by Maltby Davenport Babcock, and it was published after his death in 1901. Babcock was a minister from Lockport, New York, who would often take walks overlooking a cliff where he would enjoy the view of the beautiful Lake Ontario and the upstate New York scenery. As he prepared to leave for his walks, he would often tell his wife that he was going to see my father's world. The original poem that Babcock wrote was 16 verses with 4 lines each. Now that would be a long hymn. Can you imagine? 16 verses of 4 lines each. Next time you feel like we have a long hymn in worship, remember that. It could be 16 verses with 4 lines each. That is the length of the original poem that Babcock wrote. However, a man named Frank Shepard is the one who set the poem to music in 1915, and he selected 3 verses for the final hymn. The opening stanza of "This is My Father's World" reads, "This is my Father's world, and to my listening ears all nature sings, and around me rings the music of the spheres. This is my Father's world. I rest me in the thought of rocks and trees, of skies and seas. His hand the wonders wrought." The opening line of this poem, the opening line of this hymn, is the one that keeps coming back to me. This is my Father's world. These words, this theme, keeps running through my mind. Over the past 5 months or so, my family and I have been living in a couple of different homes that aren't ours, that belong to someone else. The first month we weren't in our home, we stayed at a neighbor's home as they were gone to the beach, and they were incredibly gracious and invited us to stay there. For that month, we moved our things in amidst their things, trying to keep straight what belonged to whom and whom belonged to what. Next, we moved into a short-term rental property. Before we moved in, we received appropriately clear expectations about how we were to care for the space that we'd been staying in, or that we would be staying in. Once again, we brought our things with us to another place. This time, there weren't other things here for us to mix ours with. We just brought our things, and there was space for us to put them away and get settled. But there were specific expectations, as there should be, about how we were to take care of this particular property, because it wasn't ours. It isn't ours. We are staying in someone else's home. In fact, from time to time, we remind our girls from this. Remember, this isn't our house. This is Mr. So-and-so's house. We've kept that in mind throughout our stay here, that we're only here temporarily, that the space we are occupying belongs to someone else. This knowledge has affected our actions in some ways. We've made more of a particular effort to take care of things in a certain way, as we are aware that it is not ours. We want to take good care of the owner's property, of the owner's things, so that he'll be pleased when he returns. Reminds me of a biblical story or two. And as we are getting ready to move back home, as we are taking stock of the imprint that we've left here, I find myself being reminded that whatever house we are living in, ultimately, all that is around us is a gift from God. Every home, every place that we live, that we work, that we stay, is all encapsulated within our Father's world. All of creation, the world around us, actually belongs to God. We are simply laborers in the vineyard. When I think about this, I'm reminded of my daughter's hamster. She has her own habitat, and for her, that is her world, right? She has this long aquarium that she lives in. And in that aquarium, she has her little house, and she has her silent spinner wheel, and she has her water and her food and all kinds of things. We have taken her aquarium, her habitat, with us from place to place. She doesn't really have any idea what is happening as we move her. I think it's interesting to think about my family and I as we have moved from place to place. We have our things around us. Each time, though, wherever we go, we are still within God's kingdom. We are living inside of our Father's world. It's easy to forget, though, isn't it? It's not as though we sign a lease when we are born, acknowledging that we are being born into God's world, reminding us that all the blessings that we have around us are gifts from God, that we are charged with taking care of the earth and creation around us, that we are to use the gifts that God has given to us to nurture, to care for others, to take good care of the gifts we've been given. It's not as though we have a yearly lease from God. Have you been taking good care of the property? Have you been da-da-da-da-da? Okay, I'll extend your lease. We are just set free to live. What does it look like, though, when we remember that all that we have, the very dwellings that we live in, are all a part of our Father's world? Do we take care of things differently in creation if we remember that it doesn't belong to us? As we are now in the process of getting ready to move back into our home, thanks be to God. As I've been thinking about how we are going back to our house, this hymn has continued to come to mind, both the first stanza and the last. The last stanza reads, "This is my Father's world, oh let me never forget, that though the wrong seems oft so strong, God is the ruler yet. This is my Father's world, why should my heart be sad? The Lord is King, let the heavens ring. God reigns, let the earth be glad." Those first two lines of the last stanza. This is my Father's world, oh let me never forget. I pray that I continue to remember that the blessings in my life are gifts from God, that creation around me is a gift from God and belongs to God. May we seek to live our lives in response to the grace that God has given to us, to be good stewards as we are able, with help from God, to care for what we've been entrusted with. God's peace to you this day and always. Amen.